You would expect that this revolutionary technology would be able to make sense out of data right away, but you still need to train it. You still need a lot of data. You still need expertise and human experts to fine tune it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Slator Pod. Today on the podcast, we welcome George Bara. George is the chief strategist at Zetta Cloud, and Zetta Cloud is a tech company building AI solutions for text analytics and multilingual data processing. So, hi, George. Thanks so much for joining today.
Hi, Florian. Nice to be here finally.
Yes. I noticed for those on YouTube that you're wearing a Romania shirt. Or a shirt with a slight Romanian flag on it. So are you based in Romania today?
I'm based in Romania, and yes, it's pretty discreet, but still visible. I'm still under the hype of the European Championship, so I bought a bunch of Romanian-themed T-shirts. So I still wear them, yeah.
Using some of the European Championship merch, recycling it.
Exactly.
All right. So where about in Romania are you based?
I'm based in Cluj-Napoca, which is on the western side of Romania, famously known for being the center of Transylvania, where vampires come from. I like to usually drop this joke. Sometimes people find it funny, but we're we're in a nice place. Cluj-Napoca is a big city. It has lots of universities, lots of tech companies. It's like it's called the Silicon Valley of Romania. Of course, it's slightly exaggerated, but it's still a nice place for building technology.
I went there in '96, not Cluj, but a couple other cities. Long time ago. It was one of my first trips abroad. Great memories from there. So you've had quite a career in the language industry before you started Zetta Cloud. I think you were with SDL and RWS before founding Zetta. So, tell us a bit more about some of the different stations in your journey there in your career, and then also, of course, we want to know what Zetta is all about. Give us the elevator pitch, and then we kind of take it from there.
Sure. So I'm a computer scientist by training, and I actually worked as a programmer for about 10 years. And then I think it was 2011, I landed this job as a pre-sales engineer as Language Weaver. If you remember, Language Weaver was the machine translation company headquartered out of LA. There was revolutionizing the field, and then later got acquired by SDL, which in part was acquired by RWS. So that's how I actually ended up working in the localization business. I had no intention of doing that. I didn't even know what localization was. So for me, translation technology, translators, and everything else that comes with it was quite a mystery. But after a couple of, I would call it honeymoon years, when Language Weaver got acquired, and I was doing mostly pre-sales, technical pre-sales around machine translation, I started getting acquainted with the bigger localization landscape and computer-aided translation and translation management and terminology tools and everything else that services was doing. And actually at SDL was where I met my co-founder at Zetta Cloud, and we were both very technical and didn't really enjoy the whole localization world per se. We always thought that there was more to language technology than just applying them for translation use cases. And that's how kind of Zetta Cloud was born. And keep in mind, when I started working at Language Weaver, I think that the term AI wasn't even mentioned in the brochure. So we were telling people we're doing machine learning, and they were like, what is that, and how does it work? And it was quite an effort to explain it. So we were doing AI basically before AI was kind of a thing or hype. And now we're ZettaCloud.ai, but again, we're still, from a technical perspective, we're still doing the old machine learning trick by, learning on data and producing engines for natural language processing. So we're kind of continuing the Language Weaver ethos in a slightly different way, if I may.
This is very rare. You're one of the very few people who went into the language industry into the kind of translation localization industry and managed to exit or exit partially, right? Usually the journey is you have some very different or unique story getting into it, but then you've been into it for 20 years and you can never leave. So you managed to, go in, come out again.
I actually have colleagues that, got into this translation world by mistake and ended up retiring. from SDL. Actually, my one of my long-term colleagues who I used to work with on the sales side actually retired 2 years ago from SDL. So I was, do I want to retire working in the localization space? I decided not because there was just so much exciting stuff happening outside of localization. So I've decided to start, targeting other use cases, which I personally just found more interesting. Not that localization is not interesting, but I was never really caught up into, I'm a localization guy. I was always more of I'm a technical solutions architect slash AI guy rather than a localization person. So I made my exit.
You made your exit, and here we are. Despite that, so give us maybe to make it a little more tangible for people what you do. Give us maybe a recent client win you can kind of describe, maybe with name, without name, just to walk people through what you do.
Sure. So, I mean, in short, we're building small language models, which is a weird term that just coming to maturity right now because for the past couple of years, people were kind of fed up with the whole large language models thing, and nobody can really describe what these are. But in essence, we're a natural language processing company. So we build AI technology that can process voice, that can process images, that can extract information from text. So it's basically an end-to-end solution that would allow you to understand unstructured content. And this is in essence what large language models do, but we've been doing that for the past 10 years as Zetta Cloud. So we've always been working with transformers and extracting information and transforming content even before large language model existed. And we're still kind of following through on that path because we realize that expert machine learning systems are still better at specific tasks than large generalistic systems, which are the LLMs. And one of the advantages of building small, very robust, very focused AI engines is that they use less hardware and they're more flexible and they can be deployed in the customer's infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons why we work a lot with the type of organizations that value privacy, and that's mainly public sector, at least for Zeta Cloud. And just to give you an example from this space, one of our recent wins is a fairly large project that deals with multimodal data processing, which basically combines processing video feeds, audio feeds, website content, other data sources into a single data fusion system. And then basically all the data is transformed and processed with our AI engines to make sense of it and to organize it. And the cool thing about it is we are going to do that using also blockchain technology to make sure that all the information that's being processed is basically unchangeable and just like Bitcoin. If somebody alters the content, then it needs approval of the all the members of the blockchain essentially. And that's important if you're doing with content that may end up in court and may need verification, so you can kind of hint who the end customer is. But these are kind of like the type of project that we're doing. It's usually data triage, is taking lots of data sources together in different formats, different languages, and structuring it and making it available to users. We're also doing things around not just data fusion, but also process automation. So we're kind of combining our stuff with robotic process automation tools. But it's kind of like the same thing, if you will. It's taking a lot of data coming from somewhere in a lot of formats and making sense out of it. And some part of that also involves machine translation, which we still do at Zeta Cloud.
But it's kind of one feature, one component of a bigger solution.
Exactly. And that's how we build our solutions. So instead of having a big, huge model that does everything, we have small models that do very specific tasks because they're more controllable. You can, improve their quality more easy. And there's a lot of technical reasons for us to be going down this path.
And the on-premise component is very important as well, most of the time for your clients.
It is. I mean, we've just expanded recently in the US through a partner called Altair. They're doing work in the industrial space, and basically we've become one of their AI components that their customers can access. And you can imagine there's helicopter companies and manufacturing, and they all want their software to run in their infrastructure because they're processing knowledge base articles and internal documents. So it's very rare that this kind of companies would send their data to the cloud, at least their private, important data that contains IP and stuff like that.
So when you have these types of on-prem deployments, like it's got to be very tricky to talk to clients when they come in with these expectations of today's kind of AI hype, right? It's been 2 years of like nonstop, like, okay, this is literally, AGI, and they're expecting all kinds of miracles. So like, tell us, like, how do clients see this? How do you manage expectations? What's kind of the sales cycle into like getting a successful deal there with this hype as the backdrop?
Yeah, so AGI is always just around the corner. It's been around the corner for a while now. And yes, you're right. We actually have to fight the hype first, and then we need to basically educate the customer, and then we need to prove with some sort of POC that our technology actually works, and then you have a sale, and that's at least a year. And it's a year for small projects and it's a year for big projects. So we haven't really managed to shorten down the sales cycle for two reasons. First, our technology is pretty horizontal. So we don't have like AI for marketing or AI for procurement. We have AI, period, and it can be tailored, and it's very powerful if you want to do something with it. But customers are you need to meet the customers where they are, and that's the second reason. We have customers that are very advanced in their AI adoption, and they know how to buy and what to buy, and they know how to implement it. And surprisingly, we found that public sector, government, defense, intelligence are actually more advanced than commercial customers. I mean, when we go into a conversation, they actually know what's on the market. They've tested almost everything. They have very clear requirements, and it actually, works great for us because we know what the expectations are. And on the other side, we have customers who have just been acquainted with AI mainly through I don't know, ChatGPT or the general AI hype, and they have very unrealistic expectations, and you need to kind of narrow down what's more valuable to them and go through a process. And sometimes you wouldn't even end up with a sale because simply, my answer to everything is yes, everything can be done, but at what cost? I was working today with a PLC for a customer from the financial space with a very complicated requirement, and it can be done, but is it worth it? So that's kind of like one of the things that we typically investigate with customers is what would be the effort and the results for implementing a project. And as I mentioned, the smaller the projects are, the more time they consume in a very weird way. But that's just because some organizations are better at adopting AI and buying AI than others.
How do you stay up to date with all of the new developments? Every other week, there's a new foundation model coming out. How do you kind of separate the signal from the noise here? Because you got to build this stuff for your clients.
Yeah, I mean, we after a while you kind of get a gut feeling of what works and what doesn't. We still do a lot of experimenting. We have a backlog of stuff that we want to test. But to be honest, it's very hard to be up to date. I mean, you go online and you see somebody implementing this new RAG architecture based on something, and I don't even know what that is, so I need to kind of start reading about it. And after you spend weeks, you figure out that it's maybe not what what would work for your customers. So there's a lot of noise out there. Among the noise, there's a lot of good frameworks that have been built and released. But essentially, we kind of follow our own technology stack, which is, can it work for our customers? Would it be good enough to replicate something that we've already been doing? And we go through this process and we decide if something is worth investigating or not. And there are a lot of alternatives for everything that we've already built. So we have like a I don't know a named entity recognition engine, but there are like a couple of dozens new frameworks out there, and we would have to retrain on our data for all of them and see if something's better than what we've already built. But these are massive efforts, and we don't really go into these efforts unless we have like a specific need or a customer that's unhappy. But as I mentioned, you can mainly do anything you want right now with AI. The technology is there. It's just a matter of ROI. Is it worth it? Would we need to replace our tech stack every 2 months to keep it up to date? Does it make sense? Usually the answer is no, because the customer adoption doesn't work that fast. We don't need to be always adopting and building new stuff.
Now, I know you did say you exited translation. It's kind of peripheral. It's still there, but now that's actually a good opportunity to get the view of somebody who is looking at it from the outside a little bit. Like, so how do people now, like your leads, your clients, like people that are deciding on these projects, view the translation component or AI translation as kind of part of the broader language AI ecosystem, since maybe ChatGPT? Like how is it perceived from the outside?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, and we've actually we're starting in September a new project that's 100% focused on translation, and it's mainly machine translation and improvement components and feedback in the loop. So all of the experience I had with computer-aided translation and terminology actually helps us putting in place this type of projects. But uh, people or organizations that we talk to are very excited about LLMs as translation engines. So I've seen that a lot of the sophistication that we had in the past, you would go into an organization and you would introduce them to translation and talk to them about, each content types in the different approach. It's kind of gone away. They can pretty much want to solve everything with LLMs, which is not good for the industry, and it is not a good strategy moving forward either. But is uh, I've seen this in this everywhere with AI. I mean, people just want like a silver bullet for everything, and they're kind of intoxicated with the promises of large language models and what they can do. And it's going to take them a while to come to their senses and do the right thing and implement or build technology that has a good foundation. So AI kind of has a bad and a good side. The bad side is that with all the hype and all the publicity that it gets, especially LLMs and OpenAI and the likes, people think that they can solve their problems fast and with high quality, and that's not always the case. Actually, it's very rarely the case. And on one side, it makes people aware of what can be done. So it's both good and bad. But I think that the translation industry is probably suffering right now, I guess, from all of these.
I mean, there's the perceptual suffering, there's the real suffering, there's some winners, some losers. So yeah, it's a really complicated picture at the moment. You mentioned silver bullet for everything. I mean, is that the same, at least perceptually, for like all the other, it used to be called NLP, now it's AI, but things like you just mentioned summarization, sentiment analysis, named entity recognition, intent detection, things that in the past used to be these like narrow fields that had obviously some overlap, but like people wouldn't expect one thing to do all of it. Like, is this the same for that? Silver bullet, put an LLM, do all of these things?
You can use an LLM as a silver bullet for specific things, but it would only take you so far. And the reason is it's this technology, I mean LLMs or generative AI, is inherently designed to guess the next best word. So it's actually a generative tool, and it will just start generating whether it actually knows the answer or not. And it's not as good as I would say traditional NLP tools built on transformers for extracting data. And we've had customers that actually spent, a year and a half trying LLMs for data extraction tools, and they realized that although it works, it doesn't work as expected, and they have no idea how to customize it. So that's where basically we come in with this very specific data extraction or data transformation tasks that are designed for very specific use cases that have been industry proven, that work with high quality, that can be customizable, adaptable, and so on. And we're talking here about sentiment or emotion analysis, which works for especially in the customer support space. If you want to automatically classify user reviews or feedback comments and so on. You have automatic summarization or classification tasks, which work well if you want to organize data and understand, what your databases contain. And you have named entity recognition, which is basically like a person reading a document and extracting the keywords and classifying them. And you would say, yeah, that this stuff is pretty old school and pretty boring, but that's actually a lot of what NLP is doing right now in real life for a lot of big organizations. And this type of modularized deployment, like with very specific tasks, are a very good foundation to build on. Like if something breaks, you can replace a certain component. If something doesn't work, you can fix it or adapt it. You can maybe replace an old sentiment analysis tool with a newer one. But if you have an LLM, like you need to replace the entire LLM. You need to, I don't know, do fine tuning. You need to build prevention systems around it so it doesn't hallucinate. So there's actually, I found personally that there's a lot more work if you build something around an LLM that presumably can do everything from day zero, rather than putting 10, 15 smaller engines in place and building like a pipeline, also sort of a agentic AI framework around to work with your data.
How do you guys think about product building versus solution building with all the cool new tools that are out there? Like, are you building certain products? Are you really focusing on the solutions, very customized to each specific client?
No, we're, I would say, 99% focused on products, not really solutions. Actually, we tend to turn out a lot of custom engagements, not because they're complicated to build, but they're extremely complicated to maintain in the long term. If they're not part of our product stack, building some sort of AI system with frameworks that might get deprecated and or might need update, is going to cost you more in the maintenance phase than it costs you in the building phase. So we tend to stay away from that. And what we do is we build our own product stack. We generically call it AI Factory. And it's basically a set of natural language processing engines that can do things like speech to text, machine translation, entity recognition, sentiment analysis, summarization, semantic comparison, and so on. Combined with a platform that allows you to customize these engines without writing code. We call it Factory No Code. And basically all of these components, they work fully on premise, they support 100 languages, and they're customizable. So what we offer through our products is not basically just a platform where you can use stuff, is a platform where you can actually build and control engines based on your data and your requirements, and everything works fully on premise. That's one of our key differentiators. That's all of our software can go into your data center, or even some components can work on a laptop, for example.
Who does the customizing though? Like you said, no code. When I hear no code, I'm glad because I can't code, so I love no code. But like the customizing part sounds a little more scary to me. So
we're taking very slow steps into what no-code machine learning is. So we currently have these capabilities for some of our text analytics engines, like classification, sentiment analysis, or entity extraction. And we're looking to do the same for speech to text and maybe even optical character recognition soon. And the reason is, when you talk about customization of an AI engine, is an extremely complicated task. It's basically, it's a data science task. You need to collect data, you need to annotate data to have your training data. Then you need to do a lot of experimentation to figure out what's the best algorithm or the best recipe to build a model. And then you need to put that model into production. And that comes with a lot of other, complicated things like, making it safe, secure, less resource intensive when it comes to hardware. So every single step is a project on its own. What we've tackled mostly is the second two steps is basically the building of models with existing training data and putting into production. And you can literally do that with just a couple of clicks because the platform does experimentations on its own. It figures out what the best parameters is, and then it produces a software that just runs because we deliver everything as Docker containers. So that's kind of a universal format of running software. And when we looked at this, we thought, we're gonna start selling all of these AI systems, AI engines. But what if they don't work as expected? What if the classification engine doesn't classify properly, or the sentiment analysis doesn't work for a specific language? So the customer needs to do something about it. Typically, you would say we can do that as a service, but as I mentioned, most of our customers are public sector or regulated industry, so they would never ever give you access to their data. So that kind of became a blocker. So we said, we're going to empower our customers to do the customization on their own. It was obvious that, as I mentioned before, you go and talk to a customer and they don't have in-house resources, they don't have AI experts. So we needed to create something that's very easy to use, and we did that. And we have successes of customers who basically build AI engines on their own with people that are not computer scientists and not data experts. So they're just business users, and they have data that's coming in from past processes, and they just do a couple of clicks, and they've created an engine for themselves that then just works. But as I mentioned, it's not an easy task. So we don't want to go to the route where we're going to become like a big fancy machine learning platform, because we don't want to make it complicated, which means that we're not going to tackle everything, and we're not going to be very kind of flexible into what you can do. So right now, what you can do is you can customize our own engines, and there's limit to what you can do, but it's designed to make it work very easily and to get into production very, very fast without doing scripting or coding on, or even knowing what hyperparameters are, for example, which is like the common recipe settings for a machine learning process. So we wanna help people get AI engines into production very, very fast, engines that actually work.
Yeah, and maybe you also want to minimize all the after sales kind of support, maybe if they can do a lot of it themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Because we have this line in our contracts that says AI prediction errors are not technical issues. And this is kind of hard for customers to understand in the first iterations, is that if a software crashes or a button doesn't work, that's an issue. But if you've created a software, or we've sold you a classifier that doesn't recognize a new class of documents that it hasn't seen before, it's going to give you a bad output. But that's not an error. That's just how AI works. But then we give you the tool to add it, and you can actually see what it means to add it, and you can add more data if it doesn't work. But essentially, we've seen from our own experiences is that you can get to almost 95 97% accuracy with our tool, which is on the long term is way better than any human can produce anyhow when it comes to specific NLP tasks.
Got it. I mean, it's like if ChatGPT gives me kind of an hallucination or some other random error, then I'm not going to ask for my subscription money back, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just gonna try with maybe a different prompt, or say, okay, it doesn't work for my data, and I'm gonna just try something else. But yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to have to go off on a tangent, but it's super fresh. Yesterday, I saw this on X, and it was like if you type in how many R's does raspberry have, and you misspell it without the P, like raspberry, then it just keeps insisting that it has two R's instead of three. And like it's just like they're all like there's all this talk, and then you punch it in there, and then you had this long conversation about raspberry. It eventually admitted that it actually has three R's.
Yeah, because it starts generating, and it can't go back to generating what it already started generating. That's what it's designed to do, generate, not really understand. And I've actually had the same issue yesterday. We have this task from one of our partners, which is reviewing audit documents, and they're very long and very cumbersome. And just trying to see what an LLM. We have a series of on-premise LLMs that we're using for specific tasks, and I was trying to see if one of these LLMs can actually find out who the auditor is in the document. It kept saying it's Deloitte. It wasn't in there. I kept searching in the document to verify, and then I said, yeah, "Where did you find the answer?" And said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've actually was wrong. I couldn't find the auditor." And it's like, how would you implement a mission critical operational system using a technology that actually says sorry, I made a mistake?
I was under pressure to name an auditor, and then I just said Deloitte.
Exactly. That's kind of what the answer was, and that's every time I do this, I kind of send it around to our colleagues and we laugh about it, because we what we built is exactly the opposite. So if we were to find, let's say, people's names in a document, if the name is not there, is never ever gonna show it. We can misclassify something. So the engine can, take a person's name and say, hey, actually, this is a building or it's an organization or it's a currency. It can do that. It's an inherent mistake, but we're also gonna provide to the user with a confidence score. So usually, if the confidence score is lower than a certain threshold, it's just gonna say, I haven't found anything, or there was a name, but I left it behind because the confidence score was lower than 90%. So you can actually control how this NLP data extraction system work, and you can tune them and you can control them, and you can even create a pipeline around them. You can have an engine doing repeatedly the same task, and if the same data is being processed by the same engine, is always going to give you the same response. It's never going to say, hey, sorry, I kind of lost myself and didn't. So if you send, it's almost deterministic in essence, and I think that's kind of what people are now trying to do with LLMs. They're trying to make them a little bit more deterministic, so they're putting these retrieval augmented generation engines around them, and they're doing all of this stuff. But I don't think long term it's gonna work. I think generative AI should be essentially used to generate content, and extractive AI, like typical transformer based NLP, should be used to extract content.
Do you think they've hit a bit of a threshold with these models now? I mean, it's a big question, right? But yeah, it's just that there's this inherent propensity to make stuff up, um, and 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 then just fill the blank, even though like the blank filling may be completely wrong. So do you think they've hit some threshold, and that's why they're holding back with, I don't know, GPT-5 or whatever is next?
Yeah, I think my greatest expectation is on the multimodal side. So I mean, I've seen with the latest model how powerful the optical character recognition engine is that's embedded into ChatGPT. I was surprised when I found out, I don't know, some months ago, that actually ChatGPT sometimes uses Google Translate to do translation, and uses the open source Tesseract engine to do OCR. And I have the screenshots to back it up, because it generates Python code when you send it a file, and you can see what libraries it calls. So I was, saying, oh my God, this has no future. They're using Tesseract. Everyone uses Tesseract. But then with an update, I saw that they were using something else as part of the new engine that's extremely, extremely good. And they've kind of combined OCR with the generative component, and they're able to rebuild handwriting that may be missing words, or the quality is not the case. So I think that these LLMs still have some good things to do on the multimodal stuff, maybe working with the voice, with images. But on the tech side, I mean, I think it definitely hit a plateau. I mean, I know what other companies are doing to, let's say, customize LLMs on, let's say, very specific industries like finance, and it's an incredible effort. They're spending literally hundreds of millions to train engines to understand tax returns forms and things like that. So the effort hasn't come down. It's still the same effort. You would expect that this revolutionary technology would be able to make sense out of data right away, but you still need to train it. You still need a lot of data. You still need expertise and human experts to fine tune it. So yeah, the progress wasn't that significant if you look at it.
Are you noticing some differences in buyer behavior across regions, like US versus Europe versus MENA, Asia? Maybe you've done some RFPs in some of these regions. Is there a difference? Are some more impatient, or I don't know, like different specs?
Well, I mean, I don't see any significant difference. As I mentioned, what I see is high expectations from the technology itself, and people are expecting that whatever data they have or um, whatever requirement, the technology is just going to solve that right away with no examples, no structure, no nothing. I think the difference that I see is between, I would call them AI educated customers and customers that are newer to the space. So even when I worked with back at SDL, there would be these big companies that were looking out for new technologies since 20 years, and they would know how to properly make an RFP and set the expectations properly. Uh, and then again, you go and you see RFPs where budgets are not enough, expectations are high, and there's no telling who would dare to sell them something, because you would probably know it doesn't work. And I think this is a big problem in the sense that you need to know how to buy AI, not just how to build AI. You need to have like a counterpart for what you're building. And it's sometimes it's actually quite sad that you see that organizations with actual needs don't know how to buy their technology.
Maybe that's a business opportunity for us. Not sure. So, what about security? Obviously, you mentioned before that there are these companies that would never let the data go anywhere else. Like, is that a big part of your pitch? Is that something that has kind of remained stable as just an essential need for clients? Is it becoming more or less important as some of this stuff is so cool, but it's in the cloud?
It's actually the biggest part of our pitch, and it's still growing because it's a significant differentiator. Um the cybersecurity is right now like the number one talk. There's a growing amount of cybersecurity companies out there, and conferences and everything. Just because every system you have that's on a cloud or somewhere, it is typically exposed. And there's a booming market of hackers that sell data or credentials. I mean, I see this in Romania almost on a weekly basis. Some companies being hacked, and customer lists and warranties, and everything's like it's on dark web. So I mean, security is an important thing for us, and it kind of drove us into building the products the way we did. So we never said, yeah, let's build something on the cloud and let's just not care about how we build our software or how many resources we use. We knew that our niche is going to be on-premise deployments or private cloud, and we saw these organizations that are not willing to go on cloud for some of their business operations for any reason whatsoever, and for good reasons. And we said, our data security and AI security, and having your systems running on premise behind a firewall is going to be our pitch, and our main kind of differentiator. And it's growing. It's still quite a good quite a good feature to have, to be honest.
Hey, you mentioned that you're involved in Romania's national, or I don't know, government AI strategy. What does that mean? What strategy? Who's driving it, and how are you involved?
Yeah, so I mean, in Europe, every country needs to kind of have a national AI strategy that aligns with, the European principles, and, moving forward is going to be something that's connected to the EU AI Act, which is regulating AI. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to work with the local university, local technical university here in Cluj-Napoca, to draft some of the components of the national AI strategy. And I specifically worked on regulation, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of review what some of the big companies that were using AI were doing, and what their terms or conditions were, and how they use artificial intelligence. And uh, basically, it kind of went into the Zetta cloud ethos also, because we realized that regulation is around the corner, and while we were talking about it, it actually got adopted. So this is going to become something that's going to be real in a very short time. So again, it kind of helped me understand what Europe is doing when it comes to AI, and I managed to read a couple of dozen national AI strategies just to figure out what other countries are doing.
Good for
And
you.
yeah, it wasn't always a pleasant read. I think one of the best AI strategy documents I've read was the one from UK, which is not longer in the EU, but still a good document nonetheless. And basically, what it made me understand is how AI is regarded at national level. So there are countries that are very pragmatic, that know how AI is going to benefit society and know how to fund it, and there are countries that very much spend their time on just regulating and not really building an ecosystem. So that kind of made us figure out that just having a pure commercial go-to-market strategy might not be sufficient. So last year we started investing in uh, building partnerships with educational institutions and trying to go after funding in pure AI research. And we now have three of these type of contracts signed, two at national level, one is with the European Defence Fund, and actually we're waiting for a fourth one with a large military organization. Hopefully, because as an AI vendor, no matter how small you are, you need to be embedded into what governments are doing, because they can make or break AI in Europe at least. So you need to be aware of regulation. You need to be aware of where money is gonna be uh, offered when it comes to research, because Europe and US are two different beasts. In US, you can go and say, I have an idea, and I graduated at, I don't know, one of these Ivy League colleges, and they're going to get a lot of VC money for that. In Europe is very risk adverse, so it's very hard to get a very risky business idea up the ground. But governments can help you do that. EU grants can help you do that. So you actually need to be connected with everything that European Union is doing, and EU countries are doing at the local level. And there's a lot of money being put in AI nowadays. You just need to look for it. There's grants, there's subsidies, there's a lot of programs, there's partnerships with universities and research organizations. Europe does things its own way, uh, but yeah, it's still kind of the way you need to behave in Europe to be successful in AI. Yeah, so it's important if you're a European AI vendor. It's important to actually be connected to what's happening in Europe in regards to regulation funding, because there's a lot of money through EU grants going to AI research. There's also EU grants available at national level. I know in Romania there's several. So you need to be connected, not just for the funding part, but also to understand where the industry is going, and what your potential customers might be looking after. So again, yeah, if you're doing AI business in the EU, it's maybe a little bit different than doing AI business in the US or elsewhere, but it's still a place where you can actually build a good artificial intelligence software company if you're connected to everything that's happening.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, George. Listeners, viewers, go to zettacloud.ai, and you can contact George from there. So thanks so much for taking the time today. This was great.